Now it is time to take this rig that we made in the last video and to add some power into the rear wheels, alright? And we're going to do that using a simple motor constraint, and we're going to use some keyframes. Then we're going to control the amount of power being added to each wheel individually to turn the tank and to make it move in whatever way we want it to move, okay? Now let's zoom in over here on this last wheel that we made in the last video. In the last video, we made this little cylindrical cage which represents the sprocket in the physics simulation world, okay? Now, the first thing we're going to have to do here is we're going to have to modify the shape of this object a little bit just so it can hold the tracks into place. Otherwise, the tracks are going to kind of, when the tank starts turning, the tracks are just going to slide off. It doesn't have anything to hold it into place. So we basically have to shape it like a little spool, okay? Now, for the purpose of this video, for simplicity's sake, we're no longer going to use this empty cage, okay? Because that's going to be a little bit too complicated. So let's just put that aside for now. We're going to select this entire shape, go to edit mode. This is the shape which is actually a mesh and not an empty object. And we're going to press F to fill all the faces. Okay, so now it is no longer just an empty cage. We can also just place the 3D cursor in the middle. And I'm also going to enable my screencast keys over here so you guys can see what I'm doing. Now we have to place this cylinder here in the middle of the tracks like this. And we're going to scale it up so it's just outside the tracks, all right? So just a little bit outside the tracks, just so it's just a little bit wider than the tracks, actually, like this, all right? On this side and also a little bit more on the other side. And now what we're going to do is we're going to select the faces in the front and the back of this cylinder. We're going to extrude them out just a little bit like this. Now maybe we can also make it a little bit wider so we have a little bit more space for the tracks so they don't collide with anything. Then we're going to select these two loops on the ends that we just created by extruding those two faces. We're going to extrude those again. Then we're going to scale them up on two of the axes. In this case, it's the Y and the Z axis. We're going to scale that up like that, all right? And now, in order to prevent this from having some really bad collisions and some really messy kind of physics, we're going to have to set the collision shape for this object to something a little bit different than just a cylinder. Because right now it's a cylinder, which means it's on the outer edge of this circle, which means the tracks are actually inside the object, which doesn't make any sense. It's going to be a big mess. So we're going to change that. And we're going to change that simply by clicking on this shape, all right, selecting this shape. We're going to go to the physics tab in the rigid body settings, and we're going to change the collision shape. Move this up a little bit. We're going to change the collision shape over here in the rigid bodies. In the physics properties menu, we're going to change that to mesh, okay? And now the collision starts with this inner circle and these outer little rims over here. So now it's exactly going to collide with the mesh. So we can maybe try to play that animation. As you can see, it kind of currently snaps on the outside, on the outer part of this shape, but that is because the margins are too wide over here. So the sensitivity has too large margins. So we're going to set that down to something like 0.001. Let's see how that works, all right? When we reduce that, you can see that the tracks nicely fall into place on the inside of the spool, and now these little rims on the edges are going to hold this track in place. And now let's delete the other side of this rig just so we can copy which side is the left side to the right side, so that we can have the same thing going on both sides for now, okay? So we're going to take that, and we're just going to quickly move it to the other side like that, right? So now we have this exact same rig on both sides, and we have the same little spool. Now, I hear you ask, let me change over here back to my EV render so I can have my material view, that this looks very ugly. This shape does not make any sense at all, okay? And we can change that by simply going up into our little scene collection of the wheel constraints, and find this object that we just created. I think it's going to be in the wheels collection. And all we have to do is press the visibility button, all right? And now that shape is not visible anymore. We just have the underlying sprocket here, but it still behaves the same way, which is perfect for us, okay? Because we don't have to see this ugly shape, which we just use for physics, but we can still have this exact same kind of behavior. But we're going to enable that for now, just to have it, just so we can work with it. Now that we created this shape, now we have to add some power to this shape, so to make it act as a kind of sprocket, to make it add some power to the tank and make it move forwards, all right? We're going to select this left spool, and then we're going to select the right spool, and then we're going to select, let's say we're going to select this cage here in the middle, okay? So this frame that we've created in the previous video. And once we've done that, now these are already connected to this shape by acting as a sort of spring, generic springs, just so they can spin, but they can stay in place. Now we're going to add another constraint, which is going to allow them to move, and we can control how fast they're moving, how much friction they have, all that stuff. So we selected two spools, then we select the cage, then we go to the object menu, and then we find this little rigid body section, and we press connect again, as we did previously, all right? Now we have these two ugly constraints show up here in the middle of nowhere, but we're going to open up that little menu down here. This menu is going to disappear as soon as you click anything else. So if this menu disappears, you're going to have to undo this rigid body and or this connection and make it again, so you get this menu again. We're going to set the type to motor, okay? That part is a bit self-explanatory. The location we're going to set to, let's say, selected, because then it's going to snap these to the selected shapes that we have here, to the selected meshes. So each constraint is going to be placed on the appropriate wheel. And the connection pattern, I can say it, selected to active. That is fine. And now let's see how this behaves. If this changed anything, it shouldn't have changed anything yet, so we can still see that this just behaves the same way as it did before. And also, maybe just before we do anything else, we can select all of these constraints on the sides of the tank, and we can increase the stiffness a little bit, because then it's not going to, when the tank falls on the ground, it's not going to be pressed down as much under its own weight, because the springs are stiffer, which means that there's going to be more space. The frame between the wheels is going to be larger, which means that the tracks are going to be tighter, okay? So we can set that. Maybe I already said it before this video, but I'm going to just show you where you can do that. We can set the stiffness at the bottom of this little menu. Let me pull this out so my camera is not in the way. I hope you guys can see this, but at the bottom of this menu, inside the physics properties tab, inside the spring settings, you can just increase the stiffness on the z-axis, put something like 4,000. We did in the last video, we set it to 300. This time I set it to like 4,000, just to make it a lot stiffer than before. I wouldn't go any higher than that, because that's going to get a little bit messy and it's not going to work the same way anymore. Anyway, let's add some power to these motors, okay? For the motors, we're going to select these two constraints, these two empty objects, and we're going to click on in this little rigid body constraint motors in this little menu, which is called angular. We're going to check that. As you can see, the target velocity is now 1 and the max impulse is now 1, which is very low. So we're going to increase that a little bit. The target velocity is basically the speed of rotation, the rate of rotation which we want to achieve with this wheel. So maybe we want it to rotate once per second or once per minute. I don't know what this value exactly means. But the max impulse is the amount of power that we're going to add to the wheel to make it to decide how quickly it's going to accelerate to that speed. All right, so basically the acceleration. If this is set to only 1, it's going to take a very long time to get enough power to start turning at this rate. So it might take like 10 seconds for the tank to even start moving. But if we set this max impulse to something like, let's say, 15, okay, and hold down Alt before you press Enter when adjusting this value, just so it's applied to both of the constraints. Just double check that, and it worked. Oh, we didn't check the box for both of them. That's fine. But now if we play our animation, just also be sure to quick save before you play the animation, because it's probably going to crash now. But when we play our animation, you can see that the tracks, the wheels in the back start turning, and the tank is moving forward. All right, that's moving very slowly because our target velocity was only set to 1. But we can increase that target velocity to something like 5. All right, so we're going to select both of these, target velocity 5, Alt Enter. Now you can see, yeah, the wheels are kind of spinning. They're sliding a little bit because they don't have enough friction. But now the tank is moving a little bit faster, which is cool. Now let's try see what happens if we increase the friction on these two wheels a little bit so that they're not spinning as much. We're going to select them both, go to the surface response, and we're going to set that to something like 0.8. Let's see how that behaves. It seems like they're still sliding, but it's a little bit better, but they're still sliding a bit. We can maybe increase it a little bit more, but I don't want to push it too far because then they're going to start catching onto the wrong parts of the wheel. Something might go wrong. This is not too visible anyway, so let's just not even worry about it too much, all right? Let's just leave that at 0.8. So now we made the tank start moving forward, but how are we going to make it turn? Okay, and we're going to do that by adding some keyframes, which are going to change the amount of power being added to each wheel separately. So for example, if this tank has to turn to the left side, that means that this wheel has to start turning more slowly, while this one has to start turning more quickly. So, or maybe to make it a little bit simpler, we just slow the left wheel down, or the left sprocket down, or the left track down, while we keep this one at the same speed, all right? So for the left sprocket, okay, we're going to set some keyframes while we're going to keep this one the same for now, okay? So let's select the left sprocket. And then we're going to go over here to the motor setting. We're going to select the constraint, not the sprocket. All right. We're going to go to the motor settings, and we're going to keyframe our target velocity and our impulse. Okay. Let's set it to like keyframe 100, because on keyframe 100 we want the tank to start turning left. All right. We're going to set 2 keyframes over here for both the target velocity and the max impulse. And then on the next frame, okay, so we're going to move to like frame 101 or 102. We're going to set the target velocity to 2. And we're going to set the max impulse. Let's just leave that at 15. Let's see what happens. I think maybe we have to make it negative to slow it down, but let's see what happens, all right? So now if we play our animation, first they both start moving at the exact same speed, all right? And then this one starts slowing down, okay? And now while this is happening, the tank starts turning to the left, all right? And then let's say at some point, okay, we turn it left far enough, so at this point we don't want it turning left anymore. We want it to pick back up again, and we want him to start moving forwards again, all right? So let's say frame 220, we want him to start moving forwards again and stop turning. So we're going to once again select this constraint. We should have probably parented this to the tank. We should have just selected this rig and parented to the tank, so it moves together with the tank, all right? Select all the objects in this menu here. We're going to parent that to the main body of the tank. We're going to select all the track constraints or the wheel constraints. We're also going to parent those just so they're moving together. They're moving together with the tank, and we don't have to rig stuff from a distance, all right? We're going to do the same with these motors. We're going to move them to track constraints, no, wheel constraints, and we're also going to parent them to the tank, all right? So now let's see. Now they should move all together, which is great. They do. So the tank starts moving forward. Now it has to bake again, so it's a little bit slow, but then it's going to start turning to the left, all right? And now on frame, let's say 200, we want him to straighten up again. All right, so frame 200, we're going to select this motor. We're going to add another keyframe over here. Okay, target velocity. So now it's still 2 up until this point. It stays on 2. But then on the next frame, we want it to jump back up to 5. Okay, for this left constraint. So now it's back up to 5. It's back up at the same speed as the other wheel. And now we also have to set the max impulse. Let's set that to like 25. Just add some more power so it quickly picks up and quickly adjusts the amount of power in the wheel. All right, let's see what happens. All right, we play the animation. Tank starts moving forward. Then the left track starts slowing down. All right, and now it's slow, it's slow, it's slow. And then again, it picks up, and now it's again at a rate of 5, rotation rate of 5, or target velocity of 5. And now it's moving straight again. Okay, now all we have to do to change the amount by which it rotated is we can move these keyframes forward a little bit more, so it spends more time on the rotation. Okay, let's see what that works, how that works for us. All right, it starts turning to the left. All right, it spends some time, if you spends a few seconds with differing track rotation, and then it straightens up again. And now it turned a little bit more than it did last time. And now you get the point. You can just control the amount of power. You can increase the amount of power, decrease the amount of power here to make it turn more. Then you can change it, make it turn to the other side. It's basically the same thing. You just play around with some of the keyframes. And that is how you power the wheels. And now once you're done animating, or even if you're not done animating, since we don't need these things, we can just hide them from plain view. Okay, we're going to go to we set this to the wheels collection. Just going to make those two invisible so we don't see those ugly cylindrical shapes. And now this tank it's very easy to animate. You can make it go over any obstacle, make it go in any direction that you want using physics. It's going to be quite realistic, all right? I hope this helped some of you guys. Thank you for watching, and let me know in the comments what you want to see next.